Hello everyone, this is George Homer with Law Room and Campus Clarity. Thank you for joining our webinar today on tracking progress for New York Enough is Enough legislation. I'm George Homer. I'm an account executive here at Law Room and Campus Clarity. Been here about 9 years and have helped hundreds of higher ed institutions with online training for Title IX, Campus Save, Enough is Enough, harassment prevention, and other conduct and compliance topics. I do want to thank everyone for joining us today on our webinar, and we will be distributing out recordings of this, so if colleagues couldn't make it or if you want information to continue to be able to go back and reference, you will have access to this. I will say that on our call today we do have a number of existing customers who use Campus Clarity, and so really excited to be able to share with you some of the things that we're doing. And then at the end of this webinar, we will go through an optional 10-minute product overview of the Think About It program. And so for our existing clients who already are using us, may not be of much value to walk through that demo. So we will have about a 30-minute webinar today. We'll talk a little bit about an overview of the New York Enough is Enough requirements. We'll talk through Campus Clarity and the updates that we've made to programming, as well as updates in general around Enough is Enough. We'll also talk about climate surveys and how campus climate surveys help you go beyond compliance, and we know there are some campus climate survey requirements for Enough is Enough, but doing more than just checking the box, and why are things that we will be going over here today. And I do speak with a number of colleges and universities in New York on a daily basis, and so we'll share some insights and challenges related to Enough is Enough and Title IX and what we see firsthand from these conversations. We'll get started now, and we'll talk a little bit about Campus Clarity from a background perspective, so who we are. So in 2010, our Think About It student program was created in collaboration with USF, University of San Francisco, to meet Title IX requirements. We know that 2011 there was an OCR Dear Colleague letter that came out, and so our employee training was developed quickly in 2011 and launched. 2013 there were we were launching Think About It for students, and in that time period we had the Campus Save Act that came about, so there was an amendment to the Violence Against Women Act, and so we quickly updated our programs to be state-specific to meet those Campus Save Act jurisdictional requirements. We had changes to California's affirmative consent requirements. So Yes Means Yes was enacted, as well as OCR's frequently asked questions and guidance on Title IX, and so we were always updating programs, which we'll talk about on why that's so important, from contextualizing law changes and jurisdictional law in training materials. And then in 2015, Governor Cuomo signed in the New York Enough is Enough legislation, so July of 2015, and final regs were issued. And then in 2015, we also launched multiple courses for multiple audiences, so graduate students, adult learners, community college students, and so forth. And we learned that it was extremely important to have audience-specific versioning. So we'll talk through a little bit about that as well. And so just to take a step back and talk a little bit about the Campus Save Act requirements, we do know from a training perspective, all incoming students and new employees must be offered primary prevention training. Faculty and students must be offered ongoing prevention and awareness campaigns. All enrolled students in institutions need to be able to document that they've met these regulatory requirements. So we're taking a step back to look at Campus Save Act and Title IX, and then we'll look at some of the requirements for Enough is Enough. So from a Title IX perspective, definitely deepens institutional responsibility to train students and faculty on an ongoing basis, and so schools should provide sexual violence training for students at regular intervals, and then employees on a regular basis need to know what they're required to report on, as well as how to respond to reports of sexual violence. And so just to talk a little bit now about what we're seeing from other colleges and universities in New York that have faced similar challenges to meet Enough is Enough and Title IX training requirements. And so so many of the colleges and universities that I'm talking with already have a training program in place when we start these conversations, and either it was something built internally or they're using another solution. And so in either case, we saw some consistent patterns. If the program was built in-house, they'd get a couple months and start to run out of steam from a maintenance perspective, as well as an updating the program from legal requirements. And so contextualizing and legally addressing these updates on an ongoing basis made it impractical, or in the worst case scenario, an OCR complaint arrived and it's just too risky to entrust the development to these internal resources. In the case of external vendors, we're finding that institutions are relying on a host of different training options, not just one, to piecemeal together a program, and they're hoping that that meets the mark. And typically this is the result of evolving legislation, making it difficult to rely on a single vendor. And so we know that this decentralized approach has created some anxiety with institutions in New York and across the country. We also talk about deploying courses to faculty and staff, and so faculty can be very supportive of initiatives for students, but can be less than enthusiastic about completing the courses themselves. And so fortunately, as an online compliance training company that's been providing courses to employees for over a decade, we understand this dilemma, and so our faculty and staff courses are essentially shortened in 45 minutes. And then we talk about the student experience, and so most of our college and university customers went in believing that they're able to deliver a one-size-fits-all approach to training programs. And so I'd mentioned in the beginning, having audience-specific courses is critical. And so an 18-year-old new student versus a 35-year-old grad student is going to need different experiences and different training because they do have these different experiences. And so it's really critical to have training that's age-appropriate and audience-based. And so, we see this this other area of concern, and this is the last piece that I'll bring up before we walk into some of the enough is enough legislation. So we see that institutions have been using the same program for over and over for years at a time, and so there becomes this frustration or challenge is that haven't we seen this before syndrome, which occurs when institutions are stuck replaying the same material over and over again. And so there can be, decline in engagement and interest, and it's just essentially checking the box if they're not refreshing and iterating and innovating new content. And so we're extremely so when it comes to refreshing programs or looking at current trends, CampusClarity is a leader in the space of really making a difference on campus and having something that is continuously refreshed and iterated and innovated on a yearly basis. And so we know some facts about Enough is Enough. It was signed into law July 7, 2015. Reporting and climate survey requirements are due next month here, July 1st, 2016. Applies regardless of protected status, including LGBT status on and off campus or studying abroad. There's state-required definitions for bystander confidentiality, privacy, and reporting. There's a requirement for the institutional code of conduct, affirmative consent, regardless of if the person is under the influence. Initiating the act requires institutions to adopt a specific Bill of Student Rights, and failure to comply disqualifies an institution that has not filed such certificate by September 1 of 2016 from receiving state aid or assistance until the filing date. And so we know that there is training requirements as it pertains to Enough is Enough, and so requires institutions to implement a comprehensive student onboarding and education campaign. Section 6447 required education topics for first-year students, athletes, and transfers, including affirmative consent, as well as definitions, the role and contacts for Title IX coordinators, long-term impacts of sexual violence and how to take action, and consequences of sexual misconduct, new employee primary awareness training with annual ongoing courses that support the primary prevention campaign. And so just to talk a little bit now about some of the the updates, most recent updates to Enough is Enough. And I will say that we're not a silver bullet solution. Our courses are helping lay a foundation by informing students of new information. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this webinar, is that Enough is Enough is evolving. It has evolved, and we want to continue to track progress and let folks know some of the new things that are required. And so we look at compliance, October 5th of 2015, focus on new and ongoing education content, mandated training for all students, all new students, lays a foundation and informs students, incorporates new information throughout, so it's a seamless part of the student and course experience. And then we look at not a silver bullet. Definitely there's many functions and components of having a program for Enough is Enough in Title IX and Campus Save Act, and so we'll talk through how we help in most of those areas to make sure that folks are covered. And then we'll highlight some of the changes in existing materials for Enough is Enough. And so just to talk a little bit about onboarding and ongoing education content, so we'll talk through 10 critical points. We'll talk about a statement of prohibition, and so incorporating your statement of prohibition is required and a critical component of your program. And so having electronic signatures helps to continue to facilitate documentation and record keeping to make sure that you're in compliance. And so we do store electronic signatures in our program to make sure that you are covered. We look at relevant state laws, and so incorporating the New York law around consent, understanding sexual assault as it pertains to New York, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, victim protection orders, and contextualizing that. So not just having a link to some state legislation that's a bunch of legalese that students and employees aren't going to be able to understand without a law degree. And so actually contextualizing the law, making it easy to understand, showing how its real-world applications are all critical to having a successful program. And then looking at the definition of affirmative consent. And so actually providing the New York-specific affirmative consent requirement and information, and making it easy to understand as we talk about contextualizing the law. So it is not just a check the box, click through, and I didn't read it because I didn't understand. Really going through and learning about what it is that are the do's and don'ts as it pertains to affirmative consent. And then we do incorporate statutes as well, so that folks that want to dig deeper and go through the New York law specific consent statutes can from the click of a mouse. And then looking at consent, and so looking at consent to sexual activity cannot be given by a person who is forced or threatened, physically helpless, mentally incapacitated by drugs and alcohol, incapable of understanding the nature of the activity, underage, and so continuing to contextualize the legal nature of the law and putting it in plain English. Looking at reporting information, and so conduct proceedings, student chooses not to report versus a student that chooses to report, being able to go in and actually see how it's specific to each campus as well as the New York law. Looking at reporting information, and so having general reporting resources, non-confidential, confidential support and services that are all specific to your campus, both on and off campus, are critical components of the requirement. And then looking at an explanation of confidentiality versus privacy, and so confidential disclosures versus privacy, and so having a clear overview of how that applies to the legal requirements of Enough is Enough. We look at the process of when a student chooses to report, from investigation to adjudication to decisions and sanctions, all specific to New York law as well as your campus process. Looking at responses and going in and talking through reports and sanctions. And so a student chooses to report, what that looks like from a reporting perspective, as well as sanctions, possible sanctions involved. Looking at interim protective measures, and so giving students the information that they need to be able to help themselves as victims or as bystanders, and helping others is really critical to the New York requirement. And so having interim protective measures that are provided in the course is critical. Also, there's a resources tab that you can click on and go in and further review those on and off-campus resources are all critical requirements of both the Campus Save Act and Enough is Enough. And so looking at on-campus resources, looking at off-campus resources, we have on-campus here, then we go into off-campus. And for my community college clients, many of these campuses are geographically dispersed, and so having off-campus resources that are very much unique and specific to those crossing of county lines is a critical piece of this. Amnesty policy and student bill of rights, so these are all requirements of Enough is Enough, and so we incorporate in your amnesty policy. Students can go in and read through that, as well as the student bill of rights, so giving more student rights statutes that are very much required under Enough is Enough. One of the requirements here is to look at the long-term cost of sexual violence, and so looking at individual cost, looking at community cost, and societal cost are all critical areas of your program and requirements under Enough is Enough. And then lastly, bystander intervention and risk assessment and reduction. So having specific bystander intervention is critical to meeting the requirements, as well as risk assessment and reduction. So continuing to show how helping one another is not only a critical aspect, but also a requirement when it comes to actually stepping in and making a difference. And so we did update all of our courses for New York Enough is Enough in 2015. We know that courses will continue to be updated both contextually and legally as laws change, and these regulations are due by October 5th of 2016. And so we provide some additional resources. Definitely you're able to access these, and we are going to send this out in a recording so you can come back and go in and look at the different resources that we're providing to help around Enough is Enough. I will pause here as we go into the climate survey overview and ask if there are any questions. So if someone has a question as we're going through this, they can essentially put it into the question box, and we can answer that as we go throughout. So I will pause for a couple seconds here, give folks time to be able to answer any questions as we move to the climate survey piece of this. And so, when we look at climate surveys for New York, not only is there a requirement for climate surveys under Enough is Enough, but many of the institutions that we're speaking with are under scrutiny to affect culture change and not just check the box. And so the best way to really look at efficacy is to do a comparative analysis with primary programs, with follow-ups, and then an annual climate survey. And so many of the folks that we're talking with have indicated that they've done a survey or are planning to do a climate survey. And so at CampusClarity, we see climate surveys as interlinked. So we want to help fill in gaps with programming and really address responses from anonymous climate surveys. And so climate surveys can be administered in a variety of ways, but it just makes sense to have your climate survey built in with your specific training tool in the same system so that you can make changes quickly and affect change. And so, so we look at a four-step approach into behavior change, and so primary prevention programs, follow-up courses, annual refresher courses that change every year, and lastly, an annual climate survey. And so talking about climate surveys is what we're going to be doing here for the next couple minutes. but knowing that doing climate surveys is more than just meeting the requirements of enough is enough. It's also a critical foundation in your programming to make sure that your programs are meeting the mark with its intended effect. And so Campus Save Act refresher training or refresher training in general, follow-up courses are all critical parts of programming. And so making sure that that you do not just have a once-and-done program, but having annual ongoing refresher programs, whether those are online or in group settings live, is critical to an effective program. Also looking at campus climate surveys. And so one of the ways that we've helped Campus Clarity, so we're a leading provider for over 700 colleges and universities throughout the U.S. around Title IX and Campus Save Act training. We've also launched climate survey builders where we have standard questions from the White House or the ability to change those questions and modify those to be campus specific. And so our campus climate survey tool allows you to develop very professional, very customized surveys that are obviously from a third party. So folks who are taking them, from what we hear, is that they feel there's integrity and that their answers aren't going to be revealed. And so as you can see here, we've branded this climate survey to be specific with the institutional logo. There is campus photos, and then we have text that is customizable, as well as trigger warnings. And so there's a persistent trigger warning throughout every page that you're able to include, so that people who are taking the climate survey and do feel a triggering event can go in and actually seek help. And so looking at the survey builder, so this first page is what the students would see when they go in and actually take the survey. But looking at building out the survey, we have the ability to change the questions, to modify the questions, to include an IRB consent, as well as being able to launch the climate survey by email en masse, just like you would with a course, and then go in and look at the analytics from an anonymized data perspective. And so those are very critical pieces to ensuring that your education programming is effective as you are seeing feedback from anonymized climate surveys. And so I'm going to pause here. I do see that we have a question, and so I'm going to answer that question. So is there a specific way to submit the compliance certificate, and is there a template of what is required? And so we provide real-time reporting that gives you all of the documentation that you've sent courses out. There's completion status, there's not completed, there's automated email reminders. So all of the ways that you can show that you're in compliance is with the reporting functionality. So you can submit reports to show that you've made this available, you've provided training, and so you've done what it is that the law is requiring you to do, which really you can do in seconds. And so very easy in our learning management system. And I am going to be providing a handout here which allows folks to go in and see the whole program. So I'm going to put that in the chat function, and I'm going to send that off because for the next 5 minutes we are going to go into an overview of what this of what our program looks like. And so I just sent a link for the Campus Clarity program with the climate survey information, the tracking and reporting to keep folks in compliance with records. There's also courses for community colleges, graduate students, adult learners, undergrads, employees, so all of the important components of the program that you can go in and actually look at on your own. So I'm going to go through the next 5 minutes, basically a quick product overview. And so for our existing clients who have used us, you can exit now if you'd like. Thank you for your time. Definitely appreciate you folks taking the time to join us today. For the folks who would like to stay on, just to talk a little bit about Campus Clarity, we trained actually over 1.5 million students and employees in 2015 at over 1,500 organizations. We're now up to over 700 colleges and universities that rely on us for Title IX and the Campus Save Act. From leading institutions in New York, like Fordham, we have 6 SUNY campuses, NYU, Columbia, Damon, Hamilton, Hofstra, CUCA, Malloy, and Syracuse, just to name a few. But just to talk through a little bit of the course content and product overview. And so we're best known here at Campus Clarity for our instructional design aspect, where we've won NASPA awards, we've won Stevie awards, and so we believe that students and employees should learn and be engaged, and so we developed our program with over 40 student focus groups at 18 institutions. We do use silhouettes. We found that students were very receptive to silhouettes because it removed racial bias and facial expressions, and so in this scenario, which is fully interactive in the course, we're able to pick our adventure or pick our scenario. And so I pick a situation where Alan is taking a very intoxicated Dominique into the bedroom. So as a bystander, what am I going to do? So I go and get Nabuki to confront Alan, and Alan says, hey, Dominique's fine, we've been dancing all night. So we ask a question, what should Nabuki say? So if I answer, if she's been dancing all night, she's probably interested. That's a bad call. That's the wrong answer. Dancing is not consent to anything. This could have led to sexual assault, so I actually have to go back and answer the question to move on. Also, we get into learning points, and so we know that employees and students need to be able to participate and are required to answer all questions correct to move on, so it's not just a click through, check the box type scenario. And so when I get the answer right, I get some feedback and it lets me move on. We also believe it's critical that we incorporate substance and alcohol abuse prevention into the course, and so this is a great way to show how alcohol is affecting me, from my decisions around consenting to sex and driving a vehicle. And then we look at employee training, and so we have intersections, which covers harassment prevention, Title IX, and the Campus Save Act, and bridges, which is a shorter version, which is just Title IX and the Save Act. And so in this scenario here, a professor is harassing a student. Student goes to the dean. So what should the dean do? Well, if the dean does nothing, we know that's incorrect. Dean needs to report this to the school's Title IX coordinator, so we know that's correct. We get some feedback, and we're moving on to the next scenario. We also use a multi learning modality approach to training. So we have videos, we have case studies, we have animations. All of them are meant to engage the users. Accessibility is critical, and so all of our courses are fully accessible for hearing and visually impaired students and employees, and so our programs are above 508 compliant to WCAG 2.0 level AA, which is the highest accessibility standard in the country. Tailoring the experience, so it's critical that the course is tailored to the institution, so there's a consistent message across the organization. So the course has to have the look and feel of each unique campus to maximize the learning experience. And so we incorporate your institutional logo, your welcome letter, your campus photos. We know ongoing education is critical, and so each year we're creating new courseware to refocus employee and student engagement on current topics that are relevant in the higher ed space. And so having 20 courses for employees that we include in our program, as well as 10 student courses from community college to adult learner to grads, is all critical information to provide, as well as an annual ongoing both for Campus Save and Enough is Enough. Looking at course deployment, so whether you have 200 students or 20,000, an area of concern is how you're going to monitor, track, and deploy this to make sure that employees and students are getting this done. And so whether you're doing something internally or using another solution, you don't want this to be someone's full-time job. So having full-time, real-time tracking and reporting capabilities is critical. And then lastly, having campus-specific resources both on and off campus are critical, both for the New York Enough is Enough as well as the Campus Save Act requirements. So I appreciate everyone's time today. My contact information is on the screen now, so if there are questions, if there are comments, if you'd like to look at pricing for Campus Clarity, if you'd like to look at course material, if you have further questions or like a one-on-one demo, shoot me an email, give me a call. Would love to learn a little bit about your strategy and how we may be able to help you. And with that being said, folks, I'll wrap this up. If there are additional questions, go ahead and shoot me an email or put it in the question box, and we'll get back and answer all of those questions at a later time. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Have a great weekend.